Oh my god, there you are. I've been waiting for you forever, darling. Come here. Give me a hug. I've missed you so much. Ever since we started seeing each other, it's become harder and harder to go without seeing that adorable face. I really wish we didn't have to ever be apart. It gets to the point where I have trouble concentrating on my work because I'm so busy thinking about you. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to worry you. Really, it's only because I haven't been in a relationship for quite a while. I just need some time to get used to that hoarding instinct I have. Eventually it'll be much, much more manageable. Although I'll probably always be a bit protective of you. And you'll catch me just staring at you from time to time. Yes, kind of like right then. Sorry, sweetie, it's just so easy to get lost in your eyes. Anyways, until I get readjusted, I will have to make sure that I get my fill of you whenever I get the chance. Which in this case means right now. Right this very moment. Come on. I'm holding you right this very minute. What does that mean? Oh. Why spoil the surprise? It's happening right now, whether you like it or not. So, you might as well just sit back and enjoy the ride. I'm kidding, of course. I won't force you into anything. But I figured that since you came to meet me anyways, you wouldn't mind. I just want to spend some time with you at my place for a little while. That's all. My instincts simmer down quite a bit when my treasure is safe in my home. So, shall we go? It's not far from here. Well, this is the place. It's pretty nice, right? Surprise, surprise. Thanks to my instincts, too. I keep my dragon cave in tip-top shape. All the better to keep my treasure safe. Now, if it would be alright, would you mind if I wrapped you up nice and tight in this blanket? It's alright if that sounds uncomfortable, but it would really help. Thank you, sweetie. 1 second. Well, don't you just look so nice and safe and warm. That's perfect. Thank you so much. Now, while you're all wrapped up, I'll go ahead and cook us something to eat. How does that sound? What about chicken soup? Lovely. I'll get started. Of course, dear. What's your question? Yes, of course. So, you're wondering why my instincts would apply to a person rather than ordinary treasure? Well, basically, a dragon's hoarding instinct isn't attached to any particular object. If it feels important to the dragon, then it will want to hoard it. People usually talk about the dragons that hoard gold coins and jewels, but if you think about it, most dragons wouldn't have much use for them. But a few that use them for dealings with humans, or even just the way they look is pleasing to them. Like, yeah, they have built up sizable caches. And naturally, those are the hoards that most people would be interested in talking about. But there are all sorts of other hoards that a dragon could have. Food, magical artifacts, and such. Even land in a few cases. Just as long as it's important. And there's nothing more important to me than you, darling. That's actually something that's unique to dragon-blooded humans. Dragons are really solitary, and they don't usually get very attached to others, even their mates. The mother raises her hatchlings herself, and wouldn't have it any other way. But humans, they live their whole lives surrounded by others. They crave contact. And that's what makes it possible for a dragon-blooded to become so devoted to one person. The really interesting thing is that it doesn't have to be restricted to romantic interests. My mother is, well, she was about as cloying as a parent can possibly be. I mean, she does love me very, very much. But I could just never get a moment's peace. He was always checking on me, on making sure I was okay every hour of every day. It was great when I was a toddler, but you get to a point where you just want to be able to do things on your own. I am lucky that I have a brother who she needed to divide her attention with, or I think I would actually have ran away. My dad really helped pull her back. He's half human, half elf. No dragon blood. So he did his best to remind her to give us space. She did finally find a good balance, and she was able to pass on what she learned about self-control to me. But come to think about it, I don't really know anything about your family. Do you have any siblings? How's your relationship with your parents? Aw, that's so sweet. Are you close with your extended family too? Do you have a favorite cousin then? Oh? Are you alright, hon? Is that a touchy subject? Well, it's just that you flinched a little bit when I mentioned your cousins. Do you want to talk about it? Oh. So, it has something to do with me. Well, you'd better get it off your chest. I'm not terribly fragile, so you don't have to worry about me. Yes, of course. So he did read the Sundering of Motiki. Well, that makes sense then. That's usually the source of complaints against relationships between half-humans and humans. Have you read it before? Wow. I'm surprised. You're so well read. I would have assumed that you had. But maybe it's better that you hadn't. It tends to confuse people. So, well, it's a collection of interviews from the inhabitants of a remote village called Motiki. It was founded after a group of humans and a group of orcs tried to settle the Motiki Valley at the same time. They were quite hostile to each other at first, but when winter hit, they had to cooperate to survive. And so they became friendly and merged into one group. There ended up being a lot of orc-human families. Things had been going pretty well for a very long time. But, of course, one day another group of orcs came along. When that group left, so did every orc in the village, and nearly all of the half-orcs, aside from a few really young ones. The man who interviewed the remaining adult inhabitants, all full humans mind you, got the impression that this was evidence that non-humans and half-humans would always maintain allegiance to their other half. The humans were understandably pretty heartbroken, and by reading what they had to say, it really makes it seem like extra-species relationships are bound for misery and failure. However, what the author and the humans didn't seem to understand is that the cause was cultural, not genetic. It was something unique to orcs at that one particular moment. You see, the most well-known and beloved stories in orc culture are of Gurek the Great. He's a folk hero that they all love to tell tales about. There's even an enormous statue of him deep, deep in the orc homeland. Well, it turns out that the particular statue was in danger. A Gnoll tribe had managed to sneak deep into orc territory and was setting up a siege on the city containing it. The orcs who came to visit were looking for help, and all the orcs who had been raised on the stories of Gurek the Great leapt at the chance, as did the half-orcs who had heard the stories from their parents. It was an opportunity that both helped them defend an important cultural icon, and they got to see it with their own eyes. There were actually a lot of humans that went as well. The ones who were left were the only ones who hadn't heard much of these stories, and they couldn't understand why they were so important. So, as you can imagine, their opinion of events was a bit different. Here's the worst part. After the book was already published and in circulation, the villagers who had left returned. So many orcs had come from all over to defend the city that the gnolls surrendered immediately. There wasn't a single casualty. The author returned and got their side of the story and realized what a mistake he'd made. He wrote a new book, correcting the first, but it never gained as much popularity, so a lot of people never realized the truth. You know, this happens more often than one should imagine. Oh, yes, for sure. You should definitely tell your cousin about this, but I don't want you to get your hopes up. That book may have been where this idea that humans and half-humans aren't compatible started. But it's probably not the only source now. The big problem is that since he's read it, he's probably heard of other stories that support the idea. Some might be equally incorrect, but a few might raise legitimate concerns. I know that there are a few dragon-blooded who are terrible at reigning in their hoarding instinct, who, well, frankly would make terrible companions. Thanks to the ideas that he got from the book, he would have latched on to any stories like that and taken them as evidence. He might have otherwise not given them much thought, but now that they're in his head, and knowing that the book was wrong won't necessarily change his mind. I don't want you to think that he's a lost cause, but chances are that his biases were built very slowly, so they need to be taken apart slowly. I'm speaking from experience here. The first person that I fell for had, unfortunately, read that book as well. It went about as well as you would have expected. I kept trying so hard to make him understand because I wanted to be with him. But all the arguing and pestering and it just made him less and less trusting of me. I actually managed to bribe him to let me take him out to dinner. But it was just so awkward. He had made up his mind, so he had a really tough time opening up. We drifted apart after that, but I ran into him a few years later. I was pretty surprised when he actually apologized for how he had treated me. He'd gone off to become a soldier, and over time he'd run into lots of other soldiers who were in, extra species relationships. Each one made him more and more skeptical of all the things he'd heard before. He eventually dropped his biases altogether, thanks to that slow and steady exposure. Anyways, basically don't expect him to accept us right away. Actually, I wouldn't assume that he ever will. Sometimes people are just too stubborn to change their mind. But in the end, that doesn't really matter. He doesn't have to believe that we have a future as long as you and I do. Well, that conversation went in a direction I was not expecting. I guess you got to see my history geek side. But I have to admit, I had a bit of an ulterior motive for bringing up family. You see, my mother is on her way over here right now. I'm sorry, sweetie. I'm afraid I have to insist. She's come a long, long way from how she used to be. But knowing I've been spending so much time with someone she's never met, it's been driving her crazy. It's either this, or she will eventually resort to stalking you. Yeah. I figured you'd prefer it this way. No, don't worry. She's actually really nice. She's going to love you, I'm sure of it. And once she's satisfied that you'll treat me right, we can have the place to ourselves again. I have some fun ideas for what we can do once she's gone.